This Lowe's parking lot was once the epicenter of the early days of NASCAR. The state of Pennsylvania has quite the racing lineage. If you're a modern racing fan, you'll know of Pocono Raceway. If you've been around a little while, you know of Nazareth Speedway. If you're a dirt racing fan, you'll know of places like Lernerville and other tracks around the Keystone State. But I'd argue that the greatest racetrack to have ever existed inside of Pennsylvania was a track that actually only existed for about 25 years. It's been gone over 50 years, so very few people know about it. But it has played a part in some crucial moments in this sport's history. We're talking about Heidelberg Raceway. Now, I recently took a trip to Pennsylvania to take a look at the site of this former track. It's been closed for over 50 years. I'll get to that in a moment, but I want to briefly share this incredible racing history packed into this little half-mile dirt track outside of Pittsburgh. In the late 1940s, just after the war had ended, the owners of a Wright Seafood Inn located in Heidelberg, Pennsylvania, about 6 miles to the southwest of the city of Pittsburgh, were wanting to build a horse racing track. Now, this restaurant, they were kind of a talk of a town. It was a very classy establishment. It was fine dining, very notorious in this part of the state. And they were wanting to build this track to bring some more entertainment to the area. Now, they were short on cash, so they actually turned to several financiers, including the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Art Rooney, who agreed to loan them money. However, they quickly ran into a problem because Pennsylvania had not yet legalized horse racing. The owners of the Wright Seafood Inn were expecting them to legalize it, but with them not actually legalizing it by the time the track was constructed, they instead converted the track into a car racing track. They did have a unique problem to work around after the track was built, because if you know anything about Pittsburgh, you'll know it's a sports city, and they had to work around the schedules of the Pittsburgh sports leagues. And so they determined that Thursday nights would actually be the best time to hold races because they would rarely conflict with the Pittsburgh Pirates games. They started hosting races there, but they ran into more problems as rain and dust would become regular obstacles they would have to work around. But they finally found some footing as in 1949, they would welcome a fledgling racing series based out of the South to their track. It was NASCAR. They were in their first season as a sport, and they had a full field of drivers come up for this event in October of 1949. Lee Petty would end up winning that race. It was his first NASCAR victory. He would obviously go on to become a NASCAR Hall of Famer and the patriarch of a famed Petty family. But Lee Petty would drive to victory in Pennsylvania, which is incredible. It's not some track in North Carolina or South Carolina that you'd think he'd get his first victory at. It was Heidelberg Raceway in Pennsylvania. There was other history in that field, as the 5th place finisher was the only woman in the field. It was Sara Christian. In fact, Sara Christian's finish is still the best finish by a female driver in the history of the NASCAR Cup Series. There's been a couple of drivers who have come close to equaling her record, but still, that record stands from 1949 at Heidelberg. The Cup Series would go on to race at the track 4 more times, once in 1951 in a race that was won by Herb Thomas, again in 1959, which was actually kind of unique because they actually used the quarter mile. And then they went back to the half-mile racetrack for the final Cup Series race in 1960, which was again won by Lee Petty. They also hosted a convertible race in 1956, which was won by Joe Weatherly. But beyond that, local racing became the major source of entertainment. Midgets and sprint cars would primarily be the forms of racing that would take place before they would turn their focus to coupes and late models as the years would wear on. However, racing wouldn't just be the only forms of entertainment at Heidelberg. The Barnum Bailey Circus would hold their last ever tent circus at the Heidelberg Raceway in 1956. In fact, legend goes that when the circus came to town for their final tent performance ever, they marched their circus elephants down the main street of Heidelberg on down to the track. Heidelberg's located about a half mile north of the Speedway. Speedway is actually located in Scott Township. So could you just imagine the locals looking out their windows and seeing circus elephants just going down the street? That would have been pretty incredible. Throughout the 60s, local racing would be the predominant form of entertainment Ultimately, the track was paved in 1967. Both the half-mile and the quarter-mile tracks were paved, but unfortunately, this was the beginning of the end for Heidelberg. Rising land costs, as well as the oil crisis and some squabbles between track ownership and the drivers, would ultimately cause the track to close in 1973. However, just before the track closed, they held a final NASCAR National Series East race there, but actually drew some pretty big names. Bobby Allison was in the field, Kel Yarborough, Tiny Lund. But ultimately, that race was won by a local driver who was a local legend of sorts, Tom Colella. The track, like I said, closed in 1973 and was ultimately sold to developers in 1975, who ended up creating the shopping center now known as Raceway Plaza. I recently took a trip up to Pennsylvania to go look at the former site and walk around. It's kind of surreal to be standing here in this parking lot, knowing that a full-blown NASCAR racetrack used to occupy this land right here. I'm standing at what I believe would be the area where the start-finish line and the main grandstands would be. It's kind of hard to tell, but based upon the clues of a topography and some of the landmarks from the old photos, especially the aerial photos, I believe it's this location. So if you could see here, it's right in the middle of a parking lot. We got a Lowe's here. Turn 1 would have been down toward behind the Lowe's. There's a Walmart over here, and then the interstate is back that way. Turn 1 would have been kind of over through the left half of the Lowe's and over around behind the Walmart. Back over here, I'll turn over this way. There's a grocery store right here, and then a couple of restaurants back over there. That would have been where turns 3 and 4 would have been. Again, this is a half-mile racetrack, so I'm thinking that turns 3 and 4 would have been kind of over in this general area, kind of halfway between the building of where this grocery store would have stopped back here. So let's go walking around a little bit and see if we can find some more landmarks. I doubt we're going to find much of anything, but we can still kind of trace the route of where the track would be. There's also a historical marker back out over this way. But again, I think we're standing right in the approximation of where start, finish, and the main grandstands would be based upon the topography. So on some of the original photos, you'll notice a road that kind of comes down the hill here. And I've come back here to what I believe would kind of be the start of the entrance to turn 1. And if you notice up here, there's some telephone poles that go up the hill that lead up kind of beside the interstate and towards an overpass with the, there's a road that crosses over the interstate up there. I believe this is where that main road would have been, is right down here where the telephone poles were, right under this Lowe's sign. So if we'll flip around over here, we'll see the embankment of the interstate there. If you look at the maps, you'll see the track comes in and goes all the way right up to that embankment, which would make turns 1 and 2. So it was kind of incredible to see how close the track was to this freeway. If you'll notice in some of the photos, you'll see some of these rocks that are kind of almost acting as a retaining wall holding up the roadway. This is kind of where turn 1 would have come in, right kind of over in here behind those rocks. We're behind this Walmart, so I believe the end of a track toward turn 1 and 2 would have kind of come through where this Walmart is at. So let's go over there and check it out. So I think you would have come from start finish, which would have been over there where I was at to begin, kind of skirting this edge of the Walmart, and then ended up over here by this embankment here. You'll notice I was just over there by those telephone poles, going up the hill there. That would have come over kind of into the entrance of turn 1. And I believe you see there, those are the rocks that I was pointing out. That would have been just behind where turns 1 entrance would be, and so the wall probably would have gone right in through here and around. Over here would have been the exit of turn 2. There's a Ford dealer out over behind this building over here, which is where the backstretch would have been as you would have made your way down to turn 3. It's hard to tell what earthwork they may have done when they were building this shopping center. It kind of looks like you can kind of see a little bit of a cut of where a turn would be, but it's hard to tell because you can definitely see that they've piled up dirt on this end, so there is kind of a dip. So it's hard to know if there was actually a dip there or not. But again, this would have been the area of where turns 1 and 2 would have been, and then this would have led you onto the back stretch over toward this Ford dealership back this way. So a lot of trash back here. I doubt that there's much still left related to racing, but again, you can kind of see where they've moved some of the earth. You can tell there's some mounds in there, but the track would have gone out this way toward this Ford dealership over here, and out toward turn 3, which I believe, just based on the map, would have been kind of out this way. If you could see that McDonald's sign way in the distance, would have been out this way. So it's hard to believe, like I said earlier, that there was a track that used to be here, but there was. So it definitely feels like some hollowed ground, but just so cool to see all the landmarks based upon the topography from the original photos. So let's go out toward turn 3 and we'll check that area out over there. So I believe this is the general area of where the turns 3 and 4 track was. It's kind of hard to tell. We were just standing over there. There's a small building that's kind of over behind that bank over there, and I believe the track would have come up through here and then kind of started making this turn right in here. You see there's this grocery store. I believe the track wouldn't have gone as far as the grocery store over there, but I believe it kind of would have come and maybe skirted this part of this Lowe's building and back to where we were in turns 1 and 2. So again, you're not going to be able to find anything racing related here because this is all blacktop, like I said. But again, I believe this is the approximate location of where turns 3 and 4 would have been. This really is the last semblance of a track still left on the property as the historical marker. It really just pays tribute to the racetrack and a little snippet about its demise. But that really is the last thing that is associated with the track still left on this property. It's located, I would guesstimate, about 100 yards behind where turns 3 and 4 were located by the main roadway out here, buried a lot by trees and those cables back there. But again, it's probably the last thing that's still left associated here on this property. The site's name, or the shopping center's name, is Raceway Plaza South. So there is still a little bit of racing history associated with it, but you would never know based upon the condition that it's in now, just being completely concreted over. So this is pretty cool. Right as I was leaving the track, or where the track was, filming down there, I looked up kind of off back across where the end of a back straightaway into turn 3 would have been, and there's this hill. And a thought crossed my mind about all the photos that you see on the internet from the air of the Heidelberg track. And I had always thought that those photos were probably taken by some sort of helicopter or plane or something. But this hill is in the perfect position to capture where those photos would have been taken from. I've actually driven up here, and unfortunately, this spot is now occupied by a retirement community just over there. And sadly, the gate guard over here is not letting me in to go try to find that spot where these photos were taken from, which I totally get. I'm filming this on a weekend, and there's nobody here for him to contact. So he just told me that he doesn't have the authority, which I'm gonna respect. I'm not gonna go in and trespass, but there's a gate over here which you can't get in. But I believe there's some apartments over in this area. I believe that's where the photo would have been taken from, down that way. But I really want to go in there and see if I can find that spot and just look at the track from this area, this vantage point, because it's super cool from what I can gather. But like I said, I'm going to respect the guard's wishes here. But just super cool part of a track here. I think I found our next best option. There's this nature preserve, nature trail up here, just behind. Up here, there's those apartments I was mentioning are right there. And if I pan around here, back out over this way, is where the racetrack would have been. And yes, these photos online of Heidelberg were not taken from an aircraft of any sort. They were taken from this hill, somewhere on this hill. I've been walking around here a little bit. I can't find the exact spot, I believe they were probably taken from further up. I may hike up there to try to see, but yeah, I'm gonna turn around and you can see where this track would have been. So if you look down through here, it's kind of hard to see. I know there's a lot of trees and power lines, but you see the highway over there, which you'll see in the background. Turns 1 and 2 would have been over somewhere in there. And then you see all the Lowe's and the Walmart down there. Turns 3 and 4 would have been kind of over in this area. But wow, this is so cool to see where this track would have been. And guys, this is why you need to support your tracks, because so many tracks have ended up as shopping centers or as housing developments. And yeah, you can see exactly where the track would have been. Could you just imagine the noise in this valley when the races were going on? I mean, if you look over here, up over here is the village of Heidelberg, somewhere over in this general area. Over here is Mount Lebanon, a bigger community out over this way. But wow, this is so cool because you can exactly see where it would have been. There's an overpass way over there, which you see in the photos. I'm still a little confused on where these photos actually would have been taken, because I think if you were to take it from the apartment complex up there, which I couldn't get into, I don't know if it would have been from the exact angle, because the angle I think would actually be coming from somewhere over in this general area. I may try to scout out a little bit more, but you can definitely see that the track would have been right down in that area, right over there. So yeah, just support your track, man, because uh, this is just sad, but also super cool. But yeah, I just wish this could have been a track that would have existed into the day, 2025, 2026, you know. But it's not, sadly. But we'll keep exploring here a little bit to try to see if we can find more evidence of where these photos were taken from. Because again, it's right down where that big old parking lot and shopping center would be. I made it to another spot. It's so hard to tell because it's so overgrown, but it's down in there somewhere. I mean, you can almost see just kind of where the cutout of the track would have been, but that's really incredible. I don't know if we're going to be able to get a better spot than this, just with everything that's been built up here and all the overgrowth of trees and whatnot. But yeah, man, I wish I could get up there, but they're not allowing me. But it's somewhere along this ridge line here is where the photos of Heidelberg Raceway used to be. Even though the track did close, the Wright Seafood Inn would have several decades more of success later on. They were still the premier fine dining establishment, but ultimately they started hitting some rough patches in the 2000s. There was several changes in ownership, some revivals to get the restaurant back into order, but ultimately they closed in the early 2010s, and that original building was demolished a couple years later, and now is currently a parking lot. So I've moved over just beyond the speedway, I guess probably maybe a quarter or a half mile from the speedway, into the site of where the Wright Seafood Inn was. The people who owned the restaurant are the ones who actually built the track, and it was located right here, this restaurant. It's now a parking lot now. I believe this building was torn down within the last decade. I believe the restaurant actually closed in 2014 after 100 plus years of business success. But it's a nice little spot here. It's incredible because apparently this place used to be the restaurant of this little town. And again, like I said, the owners of this little restaurant here built that track over there. There's a creek down here, which I believe this restaurant had creekside seating. Really nice little peaceful creek, but it's just incredible. I'll pan over this way. The racetrack would have been up the hill, kind of over in this general area. I just drove down from over there, so you could certainly hear it from this area, but you could probably even see it depending upon where you were. But apparently after the races would let out, there would be a lot of people who'd come down to this general area right here and eat after the racetrack. There's some articles online, some really funny articles about how the staff of a restaurant used to hate Thursday nights because that's when all the race fans would come down here. So cool little spot. I moved up a little bit to the actual village of Heidelberg. It's a little tiny place. I guess it's not really tiny, but I mean, it's quaint. And I'm walking down the main drag here, and I just, if you think about the history of like the circus and things that this track had,
there's some stories on the internet that said that they used to walk the circus elephants down the main road here. And just imagine if you lived in one of these houses over here and looking out your window and seeing elephants just walking down the main road here as they went toward the racetrack. That would have been incredibly cool, incredibly wild to see. But again, not much racing history or entertainment history for that matter still left in this little town. But one day there used to be a big old racetrack that was an original member of the NASCAR circuit right here in this little town just outside of Pittsburgh. So super cool to see all this. So yeah. Again, just reiterating my message: support your local tracks so they don't die. So just super cool. Like I said.
Sadly, Heidelberg Raceway is a tale old as time. It's a track that reeks with racing history, but it's been lost to time because of several issues. Unfortunately, we're just not building racetracks anymore. That's just the current state of our sport. So it's really important that we go and support our local tracks so they don't become like Heidelberg Raceway.
Friends, I'm pleading with you, support your local track or it's going to end up like this.